Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
This is not only English Digest, but it is also News Digest. That's our unit for the month of March, and it's our all-English lecture as well. So what language are we going to be speaking today, Stephanie?
Well, I hope it's English.
Right, English in the American variety. That's what we speak here. But, of course, you probably can understand British English by learning it from us here. At least learning American English can help you understand British English. You get the idea. But
Slow down, Tom. It's all
I guess
English
I'm speaking
today.
too fast in American English here. But it is our all-English lecture for today, or I could say our all-English discussion. And today, we're actually talking about something maybe a little morbid, something that has to do with death and dying, which is a part of life. But yeah, what are you going to do with your body after you die? That's kind of the subject of today's lesson.
I've discovered after all these years of working with dear Tom that he loves to talk about death and dying and all the phrases we have in English about dying, one of them being kicking the bucket. So Today, though, we're going to talk about a sort of a new thing that's going on in the state of Washington, which is on the west coast of the United States. They're doing something different to the bodies that have, passed on. Their spirits are gone. The body's left behind. What do we do with it? Do we bury it? Do we cremate it, which means to burn it and turn it into ashes? What else can we do with it? We're going to find out today.
Indeed, and this is probably a subject that people here in Taiwan know very much about because, cemetery space in Taiwan is somewhat limited, so lots of people get cremated after they die, and they've also got tree burials where you're actually buried in the ground under a tree, and think that's an option you may have as well. So, yes, this topic could be of interest to all of you here in Taiwan as it is to us, so let's get to it. Let's read through the entire contents of today's lesson, and we'll find out about what this recompose is all about. After-death care may soon look radically different in the U.S. Recompose, a Washington state-based firm, is making a place for itself among burial and cremation services. Founded by Katrina Spade, Recompose is hoping to lessen the environmental impact of after-death care by offering a substitute for customary after-death options, a move that's especially important as the negative effects of climate change loom large. Recompose uses a process called natural organic reduction, NOR, to turn a human body into soil. The body is laid on a bed of plant matter, such as wood chips and straw. The bed is then placed within a larger vessel and covered with more plant material. Over a span of 30 days, microbes break down the body into a nutrient-dense soil. The soil is then returned to the family to use as they wish, or it can be donated to Bell's Mountain, a 700-acre piece of protected wilderness. There it is used to revive wildlife habitats and support the growth of native plants. According to Spade, Recompose's NOR process can prevent 1.4 tons of carbon from being released into the atmosphere per body. This is equivalent to the emissions of a single cremation and approximately the same as the amount a burial would produce when casket construction and transportation are taken into account. Recompose's process will also ease the land burden and destruction of forests caused by cemeteries in urban areas. Finally, the nutrient-rich soil resulting from NOR can be used to enrich deforested areas and other damaged lands. While Recompose's service is currently only legal in Washington state, Spade believes that the firm's many benefits will see it quickly expand beyond state lines. With climate change, deforestation, and rapid population growth all threatening the planet, it's time that new ideas like Spade's started to take root.
Let's dive in, guys. Since it's our all-English lecture, we're going to remind each other, I'll remind Tom and he can remind me, not to speak too quickly and to define as much as we can. Since in today's lecture, we don't have our Chinese teacher.
Oh, no.
No. So we're talking about a very interesting thing that's an after-death option. Option is a choice. You might not think you have a lot of options after death. You don't get to choose anymore if you're the one who died, but your family members have to figure out what to do with your body after you're gone. So you could be cremated, which means your body is heated to a really high temperature. And then they have to crush the bones down sometimes that are left behind. And then your family might be given an urn. It looks like a piece of pottery, and inside that are your ashes. They might keep that at home or somewhere else. Or maybe you just get buried in a cemetery or graveyard. That's what most of my family members are doing. We have more land in America, especially in the state I'm from. There's a lot of land. Or maybe you want to be cremated and then your ashes spread out at sea. I don't know. Well, this is a company we're talking about today, and their name is Recompose. To compose means to put something together. We use compose when we're talking about music. Oh, I'm going to compose a new song. Or you could compose a piece of writing, maybe some poetry. To recompose means you compose it again or do it differently.
Indeed. And this word is not as common as the word decompose, which means to break down. After your body is buried in the ground, it starts to decompose, for example, and turn into soil and stuff like that. Recompose is the opposite here. It kind of reforms, okay? So this is an option that you might have after your death. And as Stephanie said, the usual options are to be buried or to be cremated. Well, here in the first paragraph it says, after death care may soon look radically different in the U.S. This is kind of unusual here. I did not know that you needed to be cared for after death, but that's what we're using here, or this is how we're describing it. Yeah, what's going to happen to your body after you die? How is it going to be taken care of? And yes, there are the traditional ways of burial and cremation, but it may look radically different in the U.S. Not just a little different, but radically different. So here, radically is an adverb. Radical is the adjective. It just means to a strong degree. A radical as a noun could be somebody who's against the government or who has beliefs and feelings that are different from everybody else. The radical left, they often refer to in politics. But here, radically, of course, is an adverb. And yeah, it's saying that it looks radically different. It's going to be very, very different how you're handled after you die.
Very different. So here is the name of the company that is suggesting this near or after death option. They're called Recompose. And we talked about that word. They're based in Washington State. Sometimes you'll see that Washington will be followed by state because some people get confused and think if they hear Washington, they might think, oh, Washington, D.C. If you live back east, a lot of people just drop the D.C. and they'll say, yeah, I'm going to Washington this weekend or I'm going to D.C. Here, this is the state, which is on the west coast of the United States. So that's where they're based, or that's where they are. Notice we're using the word firm here instead of company or organization. Firm is often used with groups where there are partners involved, like accounting firms or law firms, where there are different partners involved. So that may be why they call themselves a firm instead of just a company.
Indeed. So it's a kind of business in Washington State. That, of course, is where Seattle is. And yes, they're making a place for themselves among burial and cremation services. So we touched on these terms a little bit before here. Burial is the process of burying a body or burying something in the ground. Usually it refers to a funeral, though. The funeral will take place at St. Patrick's Church, followed by burial at the local cemetery. cemetery. For example, the body will be buried in the ground. It will be buried, so burial is the process. And, of course, when you're burned, that is cremation, which happens here mostly nowadays here in Taipei, especially at the number 1 funeral home and the number 2 funeral home. Most of the deceased are cremated, so cremation is the process of cremating somebody.
It was founded by a woman whose name is Katrina Spade. Now, she founded it or started this particular firm, and it says here that Recompose is hoping to lessen or reduce the environmental impact of after-death care by offering a substitute for customary after-death options. So if you offer a substitute, you offer something that is going to replace something else. And here we're calling what they're offering. Recompose is very different from customary or the typical after-death options that we've talked about. Customary means something that is pretty typical in a society or within a group of people. For example, if you're in the Army and your lieutenant or your sergeant, your commanding officer approaches, it's customary to salute. Use that hand and salute your officer. It's customary. So here you could also say it's customary when you eat rice not to stick your chopsticks right into the rice. You should just lay them flat. That's better. That's customary. So they're offering a substitute for things that we're used to, either cremation or burial. We're going to talk about what that is. It says here it's a move or some sort of action that's especially important because Katrina Spade is hoping that her, after-death option will have a better effect on the environment and combat these negative effects of climate change. It says here that those effects of climate change are looming large. To loom is a great word. I always picture somebody who's really big and tall standing behind me, behind my back, and then hovering over me, and you just kind of want to go, move! Right before it rains, you might have big, heavy, dark clouds loom over the sky. So, yeah, she's trying to help the environment with this particular company she founded.
Okay, so let's move on now to the next paragraph here. It says, Recompose uses a process called natural organic reduction, or NOR. This is the first time I've heard about this, so this is their special term here. And they use this process to turn a human body into soil, okay, to basically return the body back to its original condition, which I like. That's what I want to happen to my body, even if it helps climate change or whatever. I'd like to be turned back into dirt and return to the natural system here. But here's what happens. The body is laid on a bed of plant matter. So you have some plants there, maybe some leaves or some stems or something. And then, for example, here the plant matter could be little pieces of wood. Those are wood chips, and straw, which is basically dried grass. And then the bed of plant matter, is then placed within a larger vessel or a container, and then covered with more plant material. So that's what happens to the body with this process.
Interesting. So the bed is then placed within a larger vessel. When you see that word vessel, it's some sort of container. A lot of times it will hold liquid, but not necessarily. Here, of course, it's going to be holding that body. So the bed's placed within a larger container or vessel and then covered with more plant material. Over a span of 30 days, microbes break down the body into a nutrient-dense soil. When you see this word span, guys, it means range, right? So over a range of 30 days or a span is just a period of time that usually stretches out. So it's the length of time that something actually exists or takes place, the span.
Yep, sometimes you might hear people say this, oh my goodness, it has rained over a span of 2 weeks in Taipei. Gee, I wish it would be sunny again. And that brings us to the midway point in today's lesson. So I tell you what, we're going to take a break right now, not listen to our Chinese teacher, but we'll listen to something else. Welcome back, everybody. Let's continue with our lesson. Again, we're talking about a new after-death service called Recompose. I must assume that many of our listeners are quite young, and the idea of dying is the farthest thing from your minds. But hey, maybe your grandparents are getting up in years, and you might want to consider some options for when they eventually pass away, and when your parents pass away, and when you pass away, etc., etc. So, of course, the customary methods of disposing of the body after death include burial and cremation, but Recompose offers a new after-death option. Okay, it's using a process called natural organic reduction.
Very interesting. It actually breaks down that body very quickly. I was surprised at how short the span of time they need is. It's only 30 days. Now, when you see that word microbe, just think of tiny, tiny little microorganisms, germs, bacteria. Those are all microbes. And they help break down the body, and it turns into a nutrient-dense soil. So there are lots of nutrients in the dirt or soil. Dense just means heavily packed with something. If there are a lot of people in a room, you could say, wow, too many people in here. It's densely packed with people. So there are a lot of nutrients once that body goes through this particular process.
Okay, so what happens next is the soil is then returned to the family to use as they wish. So here's a big bag of dirt or something. It's your deceased relative turned into soil now. You can do whatever you want to it. Or in this particular case, there's another choice. It can be donated to Bell's Mountain. And what is that? Well, it's a 700-acre piece of protected wilderness. An acre, of course, is a unit of land that we use to measure land in the United States and other places. And yeah, it's in a wild area of the state of Washington. It's a protected wilderness. So basically, they're just putting the soil back in the ground.
Interesting. So instead of getting back ashes, if your loved one went through a cremation, you'd be given soil back instead. So if you don't want to do something with that dirt or soil, you can donate it back to Recompose, who gives it to a place called Bell's Mountain, and they spread it out there. Now, at that Bell's Mountain wilderness, this piece of protected wilderness, that soil is used to revive wildlife habitats and support the growth of native plants. To revive means to restore something back to life. Or maybe someone has fainted and they're unconscious on the floor. If you maybe put some cold water on their face or have some smelling salts, that really strong smell, it can, bring them back. It can revive them so they're conscious again. Here we're trying to revive wildlife habitats where wildlife actually live. Also, that soil is going to support the growth of native plants, plants that are original or native. We actually use that word native to the area. They originally were there. They weren't brought from another area somewhere around the world.
Sounds pretty cool. The soil, of course, is composed of your body that has decomposed in that soil, so the soil is fertile. So they just put that soil in the ground, and because it's fertile, lots of plants can grow from that, and the plants grow seeds and things like that, or berries or whatever, and the local wildlife can eat that stuff, and you're back in the ecosystem again. What a great idea. Now, here in the next paragraph, it says, according to Spade, remember that's the founder of this firm here, Recompose. Her name is Katrina Spade. According to her, Recompose's NOR process can prevent 1.4 tons of carbon from being released into the atmosphere per body. So if you're worried about climate change or global warming, I guess this is good news for you. It can stop 1.4 tons of carbon from being released into the atmosphere per body. That's quite a bit of carbon that could be sent into the atmosphere. And this is equivalent to the emissions of a single cremation and approximately the same as the amount a burial would produce when casket construction and transportation are taken into account. So let's talk about this word emission, which is often used in the plural, emissions. That just means when gases are released into the atmosphere. Like every year or so, maybe you need to take your scooter down to the local motorcycle shop and have the emissions checked to make sure you're not polluting the air.
Yeah, you've probably seen some exhaust coming out from cars and scooters that looks pretty dirty. Those are dirty emissions that are coming out. So you can actually help save some of the emissions that usually are put into the air when those bodies go through the process of, decomposing normally. So this is interesting. They can save a lot of that carbon from getting released into the atmosphere by going through the recompose process. It says approximately the same as the amount a burial would produce when casket construction and transportation are taken into account. Casket is the polite word for a coffin. Those long boxes. They used to be wooden, and now a lot of them are plastic or some other material.
Maybe carbon fiber.
My grandpa, we specifically wanted an all-wood casket for him because he was a woodworker. It was beautiful, probably the prettiest casket I've seen. So if you use coffin, it's a little scary. Don't use that word so much. Casket is more polite. They have to make them, and then they have to transport them to different places around the world so people can use them. When you take something into account, guys, those three words used together just means you consider something as you're making some sort of decision or evaluating something. You want to take something into account. So maybe you want to move, you want a new apartment, but you need to take lots of things into account, like the neighborhood, the rent. Is it a lot more expensive than what you're paying now? Maybe the neighbors appear to be nicer or nosier or noisy. All of these things are important elements in a decision you make. You want to take them into account or consider them.
Exactly. So, yeah, if you consider how much carbon dioxide is produced when they make the casket in the factory, and when you take into account the transportation of the casket from the factory to the funeral home and then from there to the cemetery, well, then you supposedly create a lot of carbon in that process. And Recompose's process will also ease the land burden and destruction of forests caused by cemeteries in urban areas. So this might be a bigger problem as the world's population increases and we keep building and building and stuff like that. But we've got these big cemeteries. I think when I went to visit New York City, I was surprised that there's a really huge cemetery in Queens there. With the rents so high in New York, there's all these dead people lying on the ground kind of wasting all the real estate there. So
I love that cemetery, though.
People do like cemeteries sometimes to go for strolls. But, hey, I think they should be cremated or, sent back to the ground so we can use that land to build housing and stuff like that.
I disagree with Tom on this.
Well, that's a different account there. But in any case here, yes, it might ease the land burden and also the destruction of forests. We've got deforestation going on. This is caused by cemeteries in urban areas. Sometimes they're called graveyards, but cemetery is the more polite form.
It's a polite word, too, I know.
Indeed. And finally, the nutrient-rich soil resulting from NOR can be used to enrich deforested areas and other damaged lands. That sounds pretty cool. Instead of putting your body in the ground to just rot there in that single place, it can actually go back into the ecosystem and be reborn, I guess, into plants and flowers and stuff. What a great idea.
You can enrich things in different ways, guys. You can enrich your own knowledge about something by studying more. Enrich just means to improve something or enhance the quality or value of something. So here we're talking about enriching deforested areas. Deforestation just means to cut down the trees in a forest, to deforest. That's not a good thing. So moving on to the final paragraph. While Recompose's service is currently only legal in Washington state, Spade, that's Katrina Spade, the founder, believes that the firm's many benefits will see it quickly expand beyond state lines. So we'll see. We'll see if it's popular. This usually happens when a new company comes up with a new idea. They kind of test it out in one area, and if it's popular, then they expand and they move to other parts of the U.S. or even around the world. Who knows, Recompose could show up here in Taiwan.
It might, so it might expand into Oregon and Idaho and places like that, or maybe into British Columbia. Who knows? And with climate change, deforestation, and rapid population growth all threatening the planet, it's time that new ideas like spades started to take root. Interesting there. Take root. That's when a plant starts to grow in the soil, and that's where we're putting the body here, in the soil. So this is a clever joke by our writer here. But this is how we wrap up the lesson here with this sentence. We've got all these things to consider. We've got climate change to think about. We've also got deforestation, which means we keep cutting down the forests and building apartment buildings and stuff like that, and having closer contact with nature, and that might cause more viruses to start and stuff like that. We've also got rapid population growth. More and more people are being born all the time. All these things are threatening the planet. So yeah, this might be something that may help solve some of those problems.
This is at least one person's idea to solve what she considers to be serious problems. So, recompose. Maybe it's something that you want to bring up with your family. You know, it's always good to talk about your plans for, especially the elderly in your family. You need to make some plans for the future. Of course, young folks die young as well as old folks die when they're older. So, yeah, it's good to make plans to see if maybe you'd want to do something different than your parents want to do. So it's an interesting conversation to have as a family, that's for sure.
Well, while we're on this topic, I've decided that I want my body thrown into the forest and eaten by squirrels.
Excellent.
When I'm dead, to return to the ecosystem. But my daughter was very clever. She said, well, squirrels don't really eat meat. They only eat plants and stuff like that. So I thought, oh, darn, I got to think of another idea.
The bears would get you,
Yeah,
Tom.
maybe I would like to be consumed by the Formosan black bear. How about you? Maybe you're more traditional. Do you want to have a burial or cremation or something?
Yes, but I don't want to be buried in the state where I was born, in Arizona.
Oh, no.
There are no trees. I want to be in the shade. So, yeah, my mom was like, but you'll be separated from the family. And I went, yeah, but Mom, come on, it's so hot there. I just don't want to be buried in a desert. So we'll see. I think after you die, it really doesn't matter, Tom.
Yeah, because you're not really here. Your body's just a shell, and that's basically for the living, to have something to go visit or something like that.
Yeah.
This is an interesting topic that all of you can discuss yourselves in your classes, but that does bring us to the end of our discussion for today. That's the end of our All English lecture for the month of March 2021. Thank you for joining us, and please join us again next time for another edition of our program. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.